In a short stretch of time from the mid-90s to the early 2000s, a relatively small group of people started playing around with this thing called the World Wide Web. They had the audacity to think they just might change the world. This project introduces you to the OG players from those hallowed days and lets them tell you what it was like and how you should have been there. Episode 3, conversation with Scott Major. He was the builder of the original Big Red Button. Ritesh, good day to you, sir. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing amazingly well on a Friday afternoon. I think there's this thing called a pandemic that's still going on. I'm not sure what's happening, but
I haven't heard of it. Is it on the news?
Yeah. It's amazing, right? So I can't believe we were able to get Scott Major to join us today.
I know we got Scott Major. Now we can talk about him behind his back before we bring him on here. Anything you need to reveal before he can't defend himself?
Well, we could, but then he'd have to come after me afterwards anyway. So
yeah, that would be fair, right? All right, well, let's bring him on.
Let's bring him on. Awesome.
Terrific. Scott Major.
How are you?
Wow. A blast from the massive past. So for those that don't know, Scott was employee number 4. There was Chan and I, and then we hired Paul Galley or Pooby. And then I think you were the next in line of that massive thing. You were there from the beginning in the bowels of the Time Life building. And wow. And these days you're running what, 8,000 people, like a massive group at Deloitte?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I've been out doing Deloitte Digital for, I don't know, the past 20 years almost since I left agency.
Oh, wow.
So
billions and billions of dollars. That's what Major's got on it.
We
used to make fun of companies like that, right?
I know. It's ironic that you're here wearing your sports jacket. And I'm wearing my traditional uniform.
This is my in honor of Dress Up Fridays. I put on my .com uniform, which was a blue blazer, a button-down shirt, and jeans. And
no, it wasn't.
What?
You just dressed up for the.
Well, that's true. But how we got to this was, remember, we were in the Time Life building. We came up with Dress Up Fridays because all the Time Inc. people, we'd ride up the elevators and they'd get all excited about Dress Down Fridays. And they were like, but I don't have a wardrobe for that. And we're like, well, we don't have a wardrobe to dress up. So we did Dress Up Fridays.
Yeah, we make fun of them all on Friday by wearing suits and stuff.
It's amazing.
It's
Scott, how are things going? You well?
Yeah, great. Everyone's good on my side. Daughter's in college and my other one's still in high school, and spending lots of time in front of this screen.
Yeah, exactly. Well, speaking of that, let's get to it. So you were there from the very beginning. So where we like to start these things off is just the origin story. Like, what were you doing that sort of got you that led you to get into this business, and then sort of give us some of that the early sauce from
also how he found agency.com.
Yeah, exactly.
The unique. This is how I found agency.com. So.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, agency.com was my first job. So I was in college. I was at the Syracuse School of Visual and Performing Arts, and I had just graduated, in May, June of 1995. I had a degree in 3D computer animation and modeling.
Oh, that's right. I remember we were all really impressed with that because we didn't know crap, right? So, he's got a degree.
I hadn't really thought through life, so I wanted to be a 3D animator, but I didn't realize all the jobs for that were on the West Coast, and I was in New York. So I was running around trying to find a job and interviewing with places, and they're like, there's this guy, Kyle Shannon. I have no idea who it was, but I was interviewing, and they're like, yeah, we don't really do that. We don't do that.
Uh-huh.
And they're like, there's this guy, Kyle Shannon, who's doing this thing with the web. You should get in touch on it. I don't know. I got your email. I sent you my resume, and you actually invited me to come in, which was shocking.
Wow. It is, because Ritesh sent us like 20 emails that we never replied to, and he had to fly from London to New York to sit in our doorstep till we would notice him.
sat in the lobby for 5 hours until somebody saw me.
It was one of the coolest interviews, though, because I think I showed up and you were wearing like a t-shirt and flip-flops, and I was like, I want to work with this guy.
we were in the Time Life building at that point, right?
You were, yeah, you were.
And it was at that point, it was just, I think Chan and Paul Galley and I, so it was probably just a bunch of like cubicles in this empty, dark, windowless office, right?
Yeah, for the most part. You know, Chan had on his blue sweater with the hole in the elbow.
We talked about that last week.
That is a legendary sweater. I wish we could find a picture of that thing.
But yeah, you know, there were a bunch of random freelancers. You know, it was at the beginning of agency, but Gabby had Urban Desires, and there were some people in and out.
Oh, right.
There were some freelancers. I remember a freelancer named Astrid, and you had. I think I was coding next to Clay Shirky, which...
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
You don't see Clay Shirky coding on his Wikipedia page at agency.com. I checked.
We should send him an email to say, hey, you need to correct your wiki page, Clay.
Yeah, you missed a professional credit, buddy.
Exactly.
Right. Coding in 95. But... yeah, you guys hired me as a freelancer for the first couple of weeks because I had that 3D experience. And I was creating, you asked me to create a 3D spinning logo of the Hitachi bug, right? They called it the Hitachi.
Oh, that's right.
Oh, right. Yeah.
For the centerpiece of their website, which was was one of the first websites on the internet. And it was the very first Hitachi website for Jerry Corbett, I think, right?
Yeah, for Jerry Corbett. And in fact... I thought we might talk about this. So,
I think he's found something. There you are. Look at that.
Wow, what a work of art that was.
That is, and look at that, Scott.
Not for nothing.
Creativity, Scott, is coming through all the way on this website.
Yeah. Look, we grabbed credits. Look at the bottom, produced by agency.com. like we have film credits, like we're putting up a film site.
Yeah, we used to get credits on all our websites, and then when we didn't get credits, I would still like comment it into the code without telling anybody.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, we would do that. Yeah, this was, and I think at some point we did actually spin that logo in the center of this, right?
Yeah. Bill Murphy wrote a Perl script that actually animated. This was before the GIF89 animated.
Oh, that's right. That's right. This was early days, and this was, to put it in context. Their site prior to this, like I guess they had, some. It was just text and like hyperlinks to annual reports and things like that. So. So I don't know if we created this thing. I think they had this thing called the Museum, but we created the digital version of it. And yeah, this was those were some.
That was like the first couple of weeks for me, and then after that, you guys brought me on full time, and I sat with Paul Galley, aka Poobie King.
Yep.
And we worked on a whole bunch of stuff. The first MetLife website, a bunch of I think Amex and Time Inc. Magazine properties, and we were doing sweepstakes for I think it was for Time Life.
Oh, Time in Consumer Marketing. That's why we had those offices.
Yeah.
Well, Scott, on that design, that first one. So you arrive and then you got these crazy guys with holy sweaters and flip flops, and they give you this job. How was it working there in creating that page? How long did it take?
Oh gosh, I mean, come on, Ritesh, it was 25 years ago.
I know. It's been years, right?
I mean, but I don't know. It probably took us a couple days to and then I just had to try and figure out, how do I get these guys? This was so cool. How do I get these guys to keep me around? And so I was trying to demonstrate different ways I could prove my value. So I was doing design. I was doing some of the coding of the pages, a little bit of, those are two different disciplines.
Yeah.
I was doing a little bit of all of that back then. And and then, Kyle and Chen just started, convincing other companies to give us work, and the place started growing. Like, it was like, by week 3, I had a full-time job. I think by month 2, we had hired like another 6 or 7 people. And by like 6 months out, there were like 20 of us there, and it growing. And I was, Paul and I were like, first people in.
So tell me about Tapenet. It's apparently famous. Is it true?
Yeah, Tapenet. Well, the Time Inc. building wasn't really set up for the internet. So I don't know. Somehow we got an Ethernet cable into the office, and then just started like from one. And I think the servers were like literally underneath someone's desk for the clients. But
it was Bill Murphy's or Bill
Morris.
It was under Bill Morris's desk. Yeah. I remember because he was like, "I'll protect it. It's here." And then the cables came from the computer under his desk, duct taped to the ceiling. Right, we ran it around the ceiling, and then it did drops into everyone's cubicle.
Yeah, Tapenet, and
there wasn't Wi-Fi, right? Yeah, that's true.
That's right. There was no Wi-Fi. And the cool thing about Tapenet was that when we moved offices, I think Kyle actually preserved Tapenet and framed it in like a shadow box.
I did. A big shadow box with a big chunk of it, because by the time we moved, I think there were 46 people working there. So it was 46 Ethernet wires where we just would like duct tape another wire like 46 times. So it's just a giant ball of tape. So we were literally duct taping the internet together.
It was awesome. Yeah, and if someone kicked the wire out, like the site went down.
Yeah. I remember a conversation, because I think it happened once, and I remember a conversation like, we might want to like put the internet where someone can't kick it. Oh my God, those are crazy. Yeah. Now, I also kind of remember you might have been the originator of the Geek and Tell. Were you the one that came up with the individual GIF images where we could space? Remember, there was no center tag? And I think it was you that came up with the set of different lengths.
Invisible GIFs.
Invisible GIFs. Yeah, and then I remember you said, "Hey, everyone gather around," and you showed them how to do it.
Yeah. The Geek and Tell. That's right. I forgot about that.
Yeah. What else from those from that early office, from those early days? Like what were the what was it like? We ultimately nicknamed that sort of working area the Pit because of 665 Broadway, but like the spirit of that happened in those early days. Like what was it like sort of doing the development with that group?
Yeah, it was cool because, we were all doing something that there were no rules for, right? There were no standards. We were trying to take, best practices from other disciplines and apply it to this new internet thing, right? So we were, always looking for things that other people had done online, or I remember, following Jacob Nielsen and Don Norman, right? Who eventually created the Nielsen Norman group, but they were applying, usability and heuristics from other disciplines. And, it was just a period of time where we were doing things new, and it was a great group of people, and we were there all day, all night. Sometimes we slept in the office. We would eat together. We'd drink after work and play video games. It was a blast. It was a cool culture.
Yeah. and then we moved to 665 Broadway. I think it was less than a year, or it was right around a year. Like it was pretty quick, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, and that was a great office. It was a great neighborhood, and that's when the scale of the company just sort of exploded, right? You went from 20 or 30 people working on a couple of websites, and Urban Desires, which I don't know if you've introduced Urban Desires here yet, but that was like Urban Desires was Kyle, it was your wife Gabby's sort of content project. It wasn't something per se that was a paid project for the organization, but that's where we used to come up with like some of the cool new things, right? And we used to test new things out on Urban Desires. And so we went from Urban Desires and this innovation site and a couple of clients to this new office, and it just sort of exploded. We couldn't hire people fast enough. I remember interviewing people. I think we interviewed and hired like 30 people on a weekend once just to scale up, because we had picked up probably like MetLife and British Airways. And I remember interviewing people, and it was kind of like, can you type?
Yeah. Can you type? Do you have a pulse?
Can you type? Have you used a computer? Can you spell HTML? Awesome. You got a job. We'll train you. And,
Yeah. The Urban Desires thing was interesting. It was definitely not a paid project. It was it cost a lot of money, but it was because a lot of the work we did was for Fortune 500 companies. They're fairly conservative. Things took a while, and because we didn't really necessarily know what we were doing or what was possible. Urban Desires was that place where you could just do anything, and it was where a lot of the innovation happened. At some point, we'll do an Urban Desires one of these where we have on some of the designers that did that. And are there any pieces you remember from Urban Desires that you worked on, or any innovations you did that you thought were interesting? Or are you too old now? His brain just gone.
I didn't go back to the Wayback Machine to pull up any of the episodes, but I remember there was like some wacky content, like Barbie dolls, like a BDSM Barbie doll piece that I remember I had to code, and I was like, this is an interesting bit of content.
Yeah, that was the famous photo expose of the lesbian Barbie scene that we got cease and desisted from Mattel for. I don't know if you remember that.
Really?
Yeah. So it was this photographer named Maria Vullo, and she did all these poses of Barbies, having lesbian sex, as you do. And so we get the cease and desist order from Mattel, and it was actually kind of our first thing. Like, do we bow to censorship? And we actually kind of did. So we had whoever knew Photoshop at the time. We had them silhouette out all of the Barbie figures. So we kept the pictures there, but it was just pink silhouettes where the Barbies used to be. So yeah, that was our first scandal.
But I do remember on Urban Desires using Java for the very first time to create interactive buttons, right? We had never done that before. That was one of the first times that we were embedding Java in a web page, and it was kind of cool.
Yeah, that's cool. What were the when we made that move to 665? Was there a shift in clients? Like, what were the clients like? What was? Do you remember any of the work from back then?
They got bigger. I mean, British Airways and MetLife were the two big accounts that I focused a lot of my time on. I think Food Television Network for a bit also, but British Airways really, I think I worked on for a number of years, and that was a pretty extensive site. It was one of the first online ticketing platforms for an airline, and we were doing that for a couple of years. It was a big site. Pretty cool stuff. There was some great innovation. I remember. You actually, I don't know if you're going to bring it up, but in the title of this thing, I think you had credited me with the big red button.
That's right.
The big red button was the launch vehicle for when British Airways went live, right?
Yeah. Well, I remember we kept launching these first ever sites for these big corporations, and at some point it hit me like, this should be a bigger deal, because like when you launch a site, you literally hit like upload or like refresh, right? Yeah. And then it's done, and I'm like, it's such an anticlimax after like development
with all the work that's gone into it.
And so we said, what if it were a party? And then I think you said, well, I kind of know a little bit about electrical engineering, so I could probably hack a mouse. And I said, why don't you go down to Radio Shack and see if you can buy that, right? And then you came back and you hacked together a literal big red button.
Big red button, that's right. And we had a party with the client, and everyone was gathered around, and the big red button was basically a mouse.
Yeah.
And it was attached to a computer, and on that computer, the cursor was on the upload button.
Yeah.
Incredible.
We had the client come in and hit the big red button, and it uploaded the front page.
Yeah, it refreshed the site, right?
The front page, and the site launched.
I love it. Amazing.
And it was a big party. It was pretty cool. It was like that created more of a launch experience.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question, Scott. So you go from 1271 to 665. Bigger offices, the pit arrives, all of these things. And I remember the cavernousness of the pit, walking past Aaron's office and going downstairs and, all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
How was the culture? Because the culture continued. I mean, there's fun. We're inventing stuff. We don't know what we're doing, but we'll make sure we make it happen. Let's go figure it out culture. Did that continue?
Yeah, the culture definitely continued, and I think it really got a lot better even when we moved into the pit, because we had our own little like video game area.
Yeah.
And Kyle brought some beer. We were allowed to have beers after hours, and there wasn't a whole lot of reason to go home. We were a bunch of like young creatives on the front end of something brand new, doing this thing together, and we were just felt like we were onto something. And we spent like all hours of the day in the pit in the office. And I mean, I slept there a couple of times. I remember we were allowed to smoke in the office back then. I was a smoker back then, right? Like you'd always walk by Chan's office, and
he's always three ashtrays going in.
It was just a really interesting environment, and it was a blast. And Kyle used to come down and do all these like unbelievably like inspirational pep talks. He'd come down to the pit and get us all riled up, which pretty awesome.
But, you know, it is fascinating that if you think about that was 1996, 97, right? Yeah. And yet today, that's one of the things that big companies espouse. They go, look, we've got a foosball table. We're going to give you food, you know. We're going to give you this open air culture. And we were doing that back then, and it was amazing.
Yeah.
But I think that's the missing. Some of it is forced today. Well, then it wasn't forced. It was just the way we did it, right?
I brought a pool table into Deloitte, and people were like, "If I use this, will a pink slip pop out?"
Yeah, exactly.
It is amazing.
I felt that the all of those perks kind of emerged naturally out of just the energy of what we were doing. It was more like, you know, the video games and the beer were more like, you know, a response to what was actually going on anyway, rather than let's put this in there to try to generate that kind of enthusiasm. Like there was, I don't know. I mean, we talked about this with Chan last week, but for me, there was this really palpable sense of like how lucky we were and that we were really at the beginning of something. And like you said, we were inventing and
it was just like, we're going to spend some more time in the office, so we're going to need video games and beer.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, it wasn't like you went to get some permission from some president of some office, right? You just went out and did it.
Yeah. Now, didn't you had an office in the pit, right?
Yeah, there was only 2 offices in the pit.
Yeah,
I mean, not initially, but it was your office, and then I had an office in the pit, and that came about after some time. You might remember, or maybe not, but you know, I was a designer, and you eventually convinced me to sort of play a larger sort of management role, running the production team.
We needed someone to herd the cats.
Yeah, and I had been there the longest, and I was also colorblind, which was really hard for me as a designer, and I was getting very frustrated with it. And I remember you sitting me down in that tiny little office at one point in time, giving me everybody's creative pep talk and how you could apply creativity to any role, as long as you're around the creativity. And so, I ended up taking an office and sort of ended up running the pit for you at some point in time, which was sort of my foray into practice building and management roles, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I mean, you know, you're trying to herd creatives, right?
Yeah. Well, that idea of the creative piece was I mean, I actually don't remember that conversation, but I kind of do now that you mention it. But I remember.
It's great. It's great, Kyle. It was like the most pivotal conversation of my career, but go ahead.
Oh. but no pressure, Kyle. How could you bloody well forget that, Kyle? I mean,
well, I remember you being colorblind, and I remember the initial thing being like, oh, maybe that's why some of the colors have been weird. But I also remember like, well, that shouldn't matter. Like, so don't do stuff with color. Like, there's all this other stuff to do. Yeah. But I also remember there started to be like, as the company grew, like once you go past 20 people or so, there starts to become camps, like the account camp versus the creative camp, right? And I remember there being kind of a resentment of the creative department where other people would say, well, like, I'm creative too. I remember that being a real palpable thing. So I bet it was around that time. So when you said that to me, like, it makes sense that I would say there's this other creative stuff, because I remember we came up with a distinction. We said, the creative group produces a creative product, but everyone can participate in the creative process, right? You can be creative in how you solve client problems and this and that. And that for me was a big deal, because it allowed us to find a way to include people that weren't in that cool kid club, you know?
Yeah, well, you know what happened was the pit. We had the whole floor of that building, right? And it was a split floor, so it was 3 steps down. You know, the entire floor was split right down the middle. So there was a high side of the floor and a low side of the floor.
Right.
It was like 3 or 4 steps down into the pit, and it was all brick.
Yeah.
And 3 or 4 steps up, it was like all drywall and, you know, nice office. And the pit got filled up with all the creative and production people,
the ne'er-do-wells,
and then all the account people and the technology people ended up 3 steps up on the other side, and there became this like weird,
there became
weird cultural rift because of those 3 steps.
Yeah. All right.
I remember when I first walked in, the first person you saw was, or the first thing you saw was a dog under Ralph Seaman's cubicle.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, where have I come? Because I came from a corporation with, you know, boardrooms and carpets and wooden, you know, wood panel walls and all sorts of things. And there's threadbare carpet and a dog who greets you first. And there's Ralph with his guitar.
Well,
and you're thinking, okay. And then you go downstairs. And I remember Eric Walensky was down in the pit, wasn't he, with Anna McInerney and those guys for a little bit? I remember.
Oh, for a little bit, yeah. That was when we were experimenting with doing multidisciplinary teams where you'd have account, project management, tech, and creative all sitting together. Yeah, that was where we started playing with that.
I mean, we still struggle with the same stuff today. I mean, at least up until Zoom.
But, right, yeah, exactly. Yeah, nobody's sitting together yet. Everyone is. So let's shift gears a bit. So one of the things that I think is really interesting from those times, like what do you feel were the big significant either tech innovations or like an account that we had that was a really big flipping deal? Hang
on, before you go there.
Yeah.
Laurent Stanovich is on, so let's not say anything bad about Laurent.
Laurent. Let's see. There he is. Hey, Laurent. Good to see you, buddy.
So it's significant.
Yeah. So, I mean, look, some of the significant things, I don't know. I mean, like a really small thing, I remember like where we sort of almost ruined the internet in 1995 when Netscape Navigator 2.0 came out. It supported animated GIFs, right? So up until that point in time, it was not a very interactive internet. And
you had to program the stuff.
Yeah, I
programmed it in Perl.
Program off of an IRC channel that created.
Oh my God!
And like within an hour of the browser being released, we had animated ad banners out for Apple Computer through Claris, which is one of our clients, and
that's right.
And then animated ad banners, and then we started making ad banners with like interactive ones with drop downs.
I remember the drop downs. Yeah,
kind of not so cool these days, but like back then, that was like a big deal.
That was a huge deal. I remember that. Like, the fact that you didn't have to program an animation, right? You didn't actually have to code it.
Yeah, that was kind of cool. I think that what we did with the British Airways with the Concorde was super fun.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, that was remarkable.
Yeah, so British Airways put a 1/4 scale Concorde up on top of the Times Square Brewery in Times Square, and
when was this? Was this like 96?
No, I think it was 97.
Maybe
96. I think it was not. You may be right.
I mean, I remember it was early because
somebody Google it.
I'll let you tell the story. So we did a live stream of them putting that plane on that building. So that was what we pitched them, and then we had to figure out how to do it. So
you could do that, yeah.
So talk about how we did it.
Big crane putting this thing, in Times Square, and I think you, Paul Galley, and I, donned hard hats and somehow convinced the building to let us up on the roof across the street in Times Square. And we brought with us a tiny little Connectix quick cam. It was the first generation of any kind of webcam that was ever created. Yeah. Right? And we literally plugged it into a modem up on top of the roof, and we dropped like 150 foot or 200 foot
Ethernet.
No, it wasn't. It was a phone cable.
No way.
It was a phone cable plugged into a modem that we ran down the side of the building around the sidewalk.
Did it on dial-up?
We did it on
dial-up. We figured out how many frames a second we could send over dial-up, because so we cut the video to what, 240 pixels, right?
Yep.
And I think it was like a frame every, like 2 frames every second or something ridiculous. But it's sort of, you can sort of see the plane coming down a step at a time.
It was the lowest res stream in history, but it was like the first one, back then, and it was just pretty cool that it was like bubblegum and paper clips, but
that was the thing, the inventiveness, right? You had to go figure this out. So it's like a MacGyver episode, right? We got a modem, a wire, and hard hats. What can we do?
Yeah. But did we put it on it was on the British Airways website, right? It streamed on the site that we had built.
Streamed live on the site, and then it got archived eventually. But it was it, and it worked.
Yeah.
We pulled it off.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Well,
go on, Kyle.
What else were some of the
obviously the big red button is the big one, right?
That's
the theme of all the achievements.
You
know what? I just have a memory about the big red button. The original source of the big red button, this was from when you first started. One of the things we always joked about was, if you want someone to click on something, put a big red button on screen and put below it, "Do not click."
Yeah.
Right? That was so we always had this joke about you can absolutely manipulate people to do stuff.
Yeah.
So right? Who came up with that immersive thing, the Nielsen?
Yeah, I think that was, again, thinking about things back then that, translate. We created this thing called the Immersibility Index. I think it came out of Kyle's mind and Paul. I'm not sure if you guys are getting an echo. I am, but
yeah, I'm getting an echo too. Hold on.
I'm not.
Okay. Sounds like it's gone. Sorry. So I think it came out of Kyle's mind, and then Paul Galley and I worked on it, and we actually worked on it with the Nielsen Norman Group, and it was basically, it was a light heuristic across 4 different. It was a measurement of brand and functionality and content and usability, and it was like,
yep.
Some sites were like these giant catalogs of content, and some sites were just like beautiful pictures and brand with no content. And then you had like e-commerce sites or something that was high functionality and transactional. We were trying to come up with a way to rate websites on this concept of immersibility. So there was some sweet spot between those 4 things that made a site more sticky and really helped people achieve, what they were going for when they landed on that site. And so that was kind of a cool thing that I think, none of these things existed back then. These standards didn't exist. And I think this translates to stuff that we do today. I mean, we do things differently today. We don't always design things as intentionally by hand. We use AI and content platforms and things now to drive experiences. But I think this was kind of cool. It translates. I think this was, I remember sitting in the back of the pit working on this. So it had to be like, I don't know, 98, maybe 97, 98.
Yeah. 97, because I remember my first couple of days going through this with you, Kyle. You were showing me how we do that, because I came from the tech background, right? So I had no idea about all the front end stuff and the creative stuff. So you were taking me through this in your office.
Yeah.
Saying, this is how we measure things.
Yeah. And I remember, what I think a lot of the thinking of this came out of, we started doing work for everything from like British Airways was a ticketing site, but they also had like travel destination content, which was super sexy. And then, we would do work for, Gucci or Calvin Klein or things like that. And those, they didn't need much functionality. They could be super sexy. So depending on your goal as a company, you could sort of dial up. Did you want this to be more of a functional site than a sexy site, or did you want it to be a balance? And so there was, Scott, you also sent me this thing, which is this usability guy somewhere out of Canada took the Immersibility Index and incorporated it into sort of a more sophisticated version of what we did. Like this, what was mind blowing to me is you said that you saw some colleges had referenced the immersibility.
Yeah.
Like I only remember we did this immersibility index, and I don't remember it going anywhere. Like I knew we had a site, but that's kind of cool that you remembered it.
Yeah, we did put it up on a website. We did allow anyone
I remember
to go in and sort of rate themselves, and it actually created a lead stream for us. Like people could set up the immersibility of their own website, and then we got their email address and said, "Hey, do you want to make it better?"
Yeah.
We can help you, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's kind of cool to see that people have used it, and it's shown up in a whole bunch of different places. If you could.
But what's fascinating is to your point, Scott. While we have new tools today, and you've got design systems, you've got content management systems, you've even got AI, the tenets are still the same. The tenets still are the same, right? You're still talking about content, functionality. How do I get you engaged? Jonesy did a speech maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and I was getting tired. I don't know, one day we were lamenting, and I was getting tired of the slide where people put up at big meetings where, humans only have the attention span of a goldfish, 2 seconds, I'm like, actually, they don't. If you give them good content, they will binge the heck out of it, right? So it still resonates today, I think. I think it still applies today, that immersibility index. I guarantee if you took it out today and put it in a slide, somebody will think, wow, that's amazing.
That's perfect for this.
That's exactly what we need.
Well, a lot of the thinking back then still applies. Like it's almost like the downside of the industry maturing is that because there's standards and because you can look at all these sites and go, well, that's how you do an e-commerce site. No one's really saying, well, how should we do an e-commerce site, right? Like no one, it's too easy just to sort of follow what's already there as opposed to having to invent it. So
everyone uses the hamburger navigation, right?
Exactly. I didn't even know what the hamburger menu was until like 6 conversations in. I'm like, oh, it's a standard and you should absolutely do that. And I'm like, well, why? Like, that's just because, I have Tourette's with asking that question.
Well, I think, going back to one of your old sayings, which I thought was so cool at the time, we were innovating, right? We were trying to figure out what to do and how to do it best. But you would come down and get us all riled up, and your speech, and I think our mantra became, figure out what sucks and don't do that.
It's relatively simple.
Right? Which is really a converse of like figure out what's amazing.
Yeah.
But you can't figure out what's amazing until you keep doing all these other things and figure out which ones work, which ones don't work. Like, so it was a bit of a, anti-innovation cry, or an innovation cry, wrapped up in
kind of a reverse psychology. Let's go innovate by like, it doesn't flip and matter because, well, that was the whole, like, I think it was just an acknowledgement. Nobody knew what the hell they were doing. And so that gives you a lot of freedom, right? You don't have to be an expert. So
it's fascinating. Yeah, I remember we still get together, and Jerry Newmark has consistently been coming to this curry club thing I was doing every month before the pandemic hit. And we used to do introductions, and Jerry would say, oh, yeah, you're the guy who always promised clients stuff that we could never do. I would always respond with, but we figured it out.
And we always
did it, right?
Exactly.
It was painful. There was a moment in time where Mitch Golden would go, oh my God, what are you doing?
Yeah.
We figured it out, right? So
that's
the
great
thing about this.
So this is a really good segue. So for me, Scott, like just where you are today from where you started, share if you can, share what you carried forward from those early days, or like, talk about your journey from, okay, you left agency.com or whatever, like, but it's been 25 years.
Were you in tears, Kyle, when Scott left? Were you like depressed, and did you go into your office and close the door and down a bottle of whiskey that Scott was leaving?
I did. Well, actually I did because, but I'll do this in all seriousness. The group of employees, probably the first, I don't know, 50 employees, maybe 75 employees. It was very much a family, and it was such a a cathartic bonding experience kind of on a weekly basis. Like we were working massive hours, right? We were inventing this stuff. We were getting our asses chewed out by British Airways when we screwed something up, and just trying to survive. And so, so anytime anyone left from those early days I took it personally because it was like someone from the family going, I'm leaving the club. But,
that's right. I'm going to college.
Yeah. So what have you carried forward from those?
Yeah, well, like I'd say, I think before I get to that, just to sort of like it was probably the most pivotal experience of my professional career, working, with both of you and the entire team. It was it's like my high school football days. It's just the most amazing memories and the stuff that I learned to take forward. And it got a little weird towards the end, right? We had acquired a whole bunch of companies, a lot of new culture. I'm sure someone else will talk about that on one of your shows.
We're talking to Eamon and Andy next week. So
right? The online magic folks. There was a lot of new cultures that came in and things changed. And then as the run up to the IPO happened, and you had to sort of harden the management team and bring in process, and people were doing timesheets, and there was compliance, and then the market was just going ape shit in 1999. You had graphic designers day trading and making millions and millions of dollars on the side of their desk, and everyone's focus was on
anything
but the great stuff that we were doing, and that's sort of like I think why I left. It was just the stuff that we started to do, we weren't really doing anymore, and the stuff that I loved, the innovation, the culture, that we're all in it together, that bonding sort of, it was sort of gone. So I went off and did a questionable startup right afterward.
I'm sure you got it funded.
As we all did. Yeah, it was funded, and it wasn't like we didn't make money off.
What was the idea, Scott? What did you do?
That was an online financial services company.
Okay.
And it was an interesting, couple of month experiment. And, I ended up where I am now through that. So we ended up hiring Deloitte as the auditor of that startup. And I got to build a relationship with my audit partner. And he's like, you should explore Deloitte as this thing is tanking in the market crash of 2020. And I was like, who can you introduce me to? And so, sometime in late 2020, early
2002, right?
Late 2000, right? Late 2000, as the market was crashing, I was talking to Deloitte, and I ended up here late 2000, early 2001. I think it was like January 2001 that I ended up fully starting here. And, it's been an interesting journey. I was hired at that moment in time by this guy named Dean Nelson, who hired me to help build an agency inside of this big consulting firm. And they wanted me to create a creative studio and do all this stuff. And I got there, and like none of the stuff was actually there. There's no infrastructure to do it wasn't there. And it literally took 10 years of remaking myself, learning the firm, learning the culture, to get us to a point where I could actually get back to doing that kind of work again.
Amazing.
And what I loved about Deloitte was that it was a private company. It was an LLP, so it was a partnership model. And the culture was one that I just absolutely loved, even though the thing that I wanted to do wasn't necessarily here at the time. And over my first 10 years at the firm, at Deloitte, we call it the firm, I met a whole bunch of like-minded people, and we started building websites again and doing interactive stuff and creative stuff and content management stuff and CRM. And in 2012, a bunch of us got together and brought our little respective groups in, and we formed what's known today as Deloitte Digital. So I've been sort of one of the original members of that team since 2011, 2012.
Wow.
And we built it from just like at agency, a ragtag group of really
ne'er-do-wells.
Yeah, people trying to do something different, but we were doing it on a platform, one of the largest professional services platforms in the world. So the things that you struggle with in a startup were all there for us. So we were building this agency on top of amazing industry depth and management consultants and people that knew every function of every type of business and people that knew technology. And so we had all these other things that I think were a real benefit to us. And, between 2012 and today, we've just continued to build and grow and scale Deloitte Digital as, I think, a pretty big global entity. And what I love about it is the things that I always wanted, that I loved about agency are the things that, I feel like for a lot of people we have, in this organization, because it is a big private organization where if you're good at what you do and you love to focus on the craft and you love to, focus on client outcomes, there's a great sort of long-term career path for you. And the opportunity to invest in things and innovate has just been awesome. So it's been a great run. And I have a bit of a new family. There are some people from the old days that are here and at Deloitte Digital, from the agency.com days, which is always a kind of cool thing to bump into them. And Ritesh, you and I have a connection point between Andy Main, who was the previous global leader of Deloitte Digital, is now working with you over at Ogilvy.
Yeah, he's our new CEO globally. We're happy to have him. Yeah. I've not had much interaction with him, but I'm seeing the moves that are being made, and I'm very impressed. I think he's exactly what Ogilvy needed at this time that we're in. But, I want to go back to what you said, which is the most important thing, and then we have to say a quick hello. So you talked about the one statement that you made that, for me, epitomizes what agency.com was, which is perfecting your craft. Mm-hmm. Focusing on your craft. Yeah, we were getting people in. Remember the 30 people in 30 days thing that Kyle went on? Crazy, right? Yeah. But we interviewed people who had no idea, but they were really good at one thing. So I remember for the tech department, the thing always was, Mitch would interview them first to see if they would be a fit. And then if they were a Java developer, we had David Bortnicek or James McHugh interview the person to see, do they really know what they're talking about code-wise, right? And then if we really liked them, I was thrown in to try and convince them to join us because they probably had 6 other offers, which were probably lower than what we were offering and didn't have all the benefits of free cars or 100,000 options and all the craziness that was going on. But it worked. It worked really well. And the people that came in were really good at what they did. And if they didn't, they went and figured it out, like Jason and Volker with Flash, Okay. Yeah. Quick hello to Eric Porres.
Eric. How are you, sir?
Hope everything is well with the Porres.
Just briefly, Scott, because I think it could be instructive for folks. How do you translate the spirit and that energy of what we had then? Now even though it's a privately held company, it's a big organization, right? And stuff changes as you scale. So with thousands of people, how do you what are the lessons you brought forward, or how do you maintain that spirit to the best you can in a big organization?
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, Deloitte's an interesting place. It's a giant matrix, right? And so you try and break the organization down into smaller parts for people, right? Mm-hmm. And so people work on their project teams. They have an affinity to, if I'm a creative, I'm part of the creative craft. If I'm a designer, I'm part of the design craft. If I'm a marketing tech person, I'm part of the marketing technology group. So we have, I almost look at it like I use this example all the time, and I think people are sick of it and hate it. But you think of Deloitte as like a giant. You think about an enterprise service bus, right? And with all these microservices, so you create teams of people that can have their own sort of microculture and relationships, and then over time, the whole organization just gets smaller because everyone gets to know who each other, who people are. People tend to stay here for the culture a bit longer. So I think even though there's a lot of people in each of the groups, people know each other really well.
Yeah, that's great. I remember we got to that place when we got really big. We finally hit on that team size of between 25 and 35 people, that if we could find a group of multidisciplinary people in that kind of pod unit, that were good at travel, they could do British Airways, and if they were good at fashion, they could do all the crazy, sexy sites. And but yeah, it ended up being that's really fascinating.
But it's so right. I mean, we do, it's the same principle I'm applying individually at Ogilvy. It's what I learned at agency so many years ago. But now I've got this informal group of folks around the world. So if I need something in Australia, I can call Toby. If I need something in India, I call Rana. And we've built that crazy, a global organization like Ogilvy. It's still small in my world because I've got a core group of about 30 that I can always reach out to.
So you can just pull
Ranjiv in Latin America, Rana in India, Toby in Australia, Pierre in Singapore. So it's sort of the same concept. It lives inside you, and you take that with you, and it works.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, Scott, this has been great. I mean, it's just been. I don't know. Every one of these shows is just like I leave these things with a giant smile on my face because it's just I don't know. We've got these shared memories, but like you come at it with such a different point of view, and everyone has their different memories from it. So.
And it's great to hear those because some of us joined a little later, so. You heard the legends of the red button and Tapenet and, and Chan's sweater. I swear to God, we've got to find it. Even if we can find a picture.
I'm sure. I have these two old, and Laurent's on, so he's probably the one that could figure this out. I've got these two old SCSI drives that I can't figure out how to get the data off of, but it's all of my work from the old office. So we gotta figure it out.
You know what? I may have some SCSI cables down in the basement.
There's nothing to attach them to anymore.
Yeah, I know.
Look,
wait,
that's a Cypress drive.
Oh, there you go.
Look, web server only.
There are online just for that. Okay.
I don't have a drive for it anymore, but I have.
You know how many zip drives I've got downstairs in the basement? Oh my God, man, that was amazing. Oh wait, Laurent says there's an online service for that. Okay,
yeah, I'll have to go get it.
You could send the stuff to somebody who can do it for you. I'm sure there's a service out there.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, I never thought of that. I got somebody to convert all my VHS to DVD, so why not, right?
Yeah. I have a bunch of DAT drives and Jazz drives and SideQuests. They probably don't even work anymore, but
They used to be. Remember, across the street from us at 665, there was a Chinese guy who had a company with all these drives set up. I remember going in there one day with Danny Gumport because we needed something converted from something to something.
Yeah.
You walk into this office, and this guy had like every drive known to man hooked up to this one master computer.
It reminds me of those sort of clickbait farms in China where they've got like thousands of devices on shelves that are all just sort of self-clicking through websites.
Yeah.
So Jason Crawford's joined us too, and he's asked if we have any Zip 100s. Jason, I've got about 50 of them.
I have a bag of them.
Probably
within reach. That's also just one of those stupid things. Like, I can't bring myself to throw them out because someday I may need to go back and get those files. Now that we have a show, there's actually maybe a reason.
Yeah,
that'd be fun.
Yeah,
this has been so much fun. Scott, thank you for joining us. We do have to get together one of these days when the pandemic is over, because you're only 1 or 2 towns over. So
where are you?
I'm in Montclair.
Oh, are you really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Good.
Yeah, been here since I joined.
Then later.
Yeah. When I came to agency, we had to find somewhere to live, and we stumbled upon Montclair. And bought a house. I've been here ever since.
You're like 10 miles away from me.
Exactly.
Go grab some socially distant coffee.
There you go.
That's crazy. I'm stuck in Denver, but I'll get back to the East Coast. All right, Scott, thank you. This was awesome. Ritesh, great to see you again.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you for joining us. Laurent, Jason, big shout outs to you guys. We've got to get you guys on next. I don't know. We've got so many people to go through, but we have to. Maybe what we'll do is the earliest people will do this individually, but then as we get going, maybe we get 2 or 3 of us together.
I think we get some
because there's so many stories, right?
I think that's a great idea. Yeah.
Fantastic.
I'll certainly join some of the future ones and sit on the sidebar like.
We'd love it. So. Yeah, that would be amazing. Actually, we got to hunt down Paul Galley. Where's Paul Galley?
Yeah, well, he's doing some
California, right? Didn't he join Lucasfilm or somebody?
Like Lucas or I don't know. Yeah, some designer, furniture designer. Yeah.
So we definitely have to do that. We'll have to track him down and have Paul. Here's what I think we should do.
We'll do the pit.
Yeah, exactly.
Dominique Gellner.
Yeah,
exactly.
That's right.
Yeah, we'll do a pit episode.
That's right.
That's awesome.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Right. Awesome.
Great.
Awesome.
Cheers, guys. This is a blast. Thank you.
Have a great weekend.
Yeah, you too. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
And thus ends our show.